Hi, and welcome to the Kate Daly Show. This episode is really important. It's important to share, and it's important to learn. There is so much evidence about what we have just been through, about what has just gone on. I cannot wait to play this for you. Back in February, the end of January and February, we started reporting on this story, and this is what we first heard. Mystery disease.
And now we are seeing human-to-human transmission in family clusters, and also in the hospitals. We have seen patients, especially children, who have a pneumonia but has no symptom of fever or cough, which means that it is not easy to recognize these cases of novel coronavirus infection, which makes the control of this outbreak more difficult.
So it's a huge mystery. We don't know what it is. We seem to be working on the vaccine right now. I'll let you know, they started working on this vaccine a long time ago, but they started letting that cat out of the bag, and all of a sudden that we were in the middle of this mystery disease. Okay, they didn't know anything about it other than it was a corona, which is a common cold. Then we had, in March, we had Fauci saying that millions would die.
The tie to this, are you thinking that hundreds of thousands of Americans could die from this?
You know, I say that and it sometimes gets taken out of context, but we have to be realistic and honest. Yes, it is possible. Our job,
Yes, it's possible. It's possible. He kept going on every major news program and saying, it's possible, millions could die. Then we locked down our entire country, over 27 deaths, not 27,000, not 27 million, 27 deaths. Here you go.
States, we continue to have new cases. As of this morning, there were 712, I believe, with 27 deaths. Guaranteed by the time of this evening, that's going to be up, and there'll be several more.
Jeez Louise, we actually locked down our nation for that. This was the second week of March, and they were more than happy to do this. It was insane. On the other side of this, doctors were told something that was a lot different. Doctors were told that it was such a mystery, but they didn't, the CDC gave them the course of direction for this, and they were a little astounded because they weren't giving them much. Here you go.
And so when I was in the emergency room in March and I was waiting for my first COVID patient, wondering, what am I going to do if someone comes in here dying of COVID? Because there is no approved treatment. We haven't been even given an offering of something that we could give to patients. We were told, just try to keep them alive with a ventilator, and 90% are going to die. That was not acceptable to me. The CDC should be the final answer on every disease. They're the Center for Disease Control. It has tons of funding, lots of research, and so we assume that they know more about the diseases than we do.
Than anyone else.
Right.
And the only thing that they're mandating is late-stage treatment. Is that correct?
Well, the bottom line is we're told that the only treatment plan is late
stage. Why were they just telling him to put him on a ventilator? It's so third world. You don't have any other course of action. If it's in the lungs and it's in a coronavirus, we know plenty about this. But they acted like we didn't know a thing. And so they said, put him on ventilators. The very thing that makes over 90% of the people die, when you put them on a ventilator, it takes over the breathing. And that's what they were telling the doctors to do. Luckily, this doctor, Dr. Richard Bartlett, came out in Texas and said budesonide is what he was using. It was an asthma steroid, and people were fine in 48 hours. But they were only told to absolutely just put him on a ventilator. And then we came to this. This is Fauci in March on 60 Minutes talking about masks.
United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
You're sure of it? Because people are listening really closely to this.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet, but it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is. And often, there are unintended consequences. People keep fiddling with the mask and they keep touching their face.
And can you get some schmutz sort of staying inside there?
Of course. But when you think masks, you should think of healthcare providers needing them and people who are ill.
Now, if you go to post that now, they say it's false information because he said it so long ago. Really? He said it in March. Anyway, he knew. Everyone knows, doctors know that they only wear them in emergency rooms for a reason. When you're sick and you visit the doctor, the reason that they never had him on visiting with sick people all the time is because we have an immune system. Fauci doesn't mention that. And nobody mentions that this year, but we do have an immune system. All right. So then in April rolls around, we're in this lockdown. Every state's in this lockdown, and they start doing some different things with saying this is a case and this is a case and this is a case of COVID because the case numbers keep rising. So this is awfully strange. Here we go. Here's Illinois Health Department talking about the fact that they're kind of just including everything.
In hospice and had already been given, a few weeks to live, and then you also were found to have COVID, that would be counted as a COVID death. It means that even if you died of a clear alternate cause, but you had COVID at the same time, it's still listed as a COVID death. So everyone who's listed as a COVID death doesn't mean that was the cause of the death, but they had COVID at the time of death. I hope that's helpful.
That's why the numbers kept going up, because I was curious about that. I was thinking, wow, how could that be? And then Debbie Birx came out and said the exact same thing.
So I think in this country, we've taken a very liberal approach to mortality. There are other countries that if you had a pre-existing condition, have a heart or kidney problem, some countries are recording that as a heart issue or a kidney issue and not a COVID-19 death. Right now, we're still recording it, and the great thing about having forms that come in and a form that has the ability to mark it as COVID-19 infection. If someone dies with COVID-19, we are counting that.
Oh, okay. We're just counting everything because that's what we do. That's what we do here. Great. The cases kept going up, but they're including everything. Heart disease, falling out of an airplane, anything that you could possibly die from. It's now COVID. All right. So then Dr. Buttar, I love Dr. Buttar. Dr. Buttar did many, many videos, and he explained why we wear the mask, because everybody's walking around in April with a mask on. Everybody. And they're shaming and virtue signaling and all kinds of stuff. Really, you should be wearing an N95 mask if you're really serious about masking up. But they decided that the cloth paper mask would do. Dr. Buttar says why surgeons wear them and why we're not supposed to wear them every single day. Here you go.
When a surgeon wears a mask or a nurse wears a mask, is it because they're afraid that they're going to get something? It's so that the surgeon, if he's drooling or spitting or coughing or sneezing,
in the surgical
doesn't
field,
sneeze or cough or spit or drool into the surgical field, into the sterile field.
Right. That's, pretty much how it goes for history here for the last century or two. But we changed it up, right? Everybody's wearing a mask now. Then there was a lot of attention on the testing, PCR test. And people started asking questions. What test are we giving? We're giving the PCR test. Well, the PCR test inventor, Kary Mullis, he actually was on video before his strange death a year ago that happened while he was very young, just strangely. He invented this test, and he said it is not supposed to be diagnosing anything. Gee, I wonder why all the numbers kept going up in April.
I don't think you can misuse PCR. No, the results, the interpretation of it. If they could find this virus in you at all, and with PCR, if you do it well, you can find almost anything in anybody. It starts making you believe in the sort of Buddhist notion that everything is contained in everything else, right? I mean, because if you can amplify one single molecule up to something that you can really measure, which PCR can do, then there's just very few molecules that you don't have at least one single one of them in your body, okay? So that could be thought of as a misuse of it, just to claim that it's meaningful. It doesn't tell you that you're sick, and it doesn't tell you that the thing you ended up with really was going to hurt you or anything like that. That's what it's not.
Good. Okay, I'm glad that the inventor of the PCR test let us know that the PCR test doesn't really actually diagnose anything. They can take one cell out of billions of cells in your body, amplify it, and say you have X virus. We all have virus in our cells. We always have. And so this was very interesting information coming from him, the inventor, who died mysteriously right before this all happened. Wow. Then on top of that, we get to the Redfield. I think this is the Redfield clip. Here we go.
That the issue that I was talking about being more difficult, is that we're going to have two viruses circulating at the same time. This spring that we just went through, February, we had a benefit of having the flu season ended.
I'm sorry, the flu season just ended in February for the first time in history. This is Redfield, director of the CDC, on the White House steps saying this. It just ended. It just ended. That's it.
So we could use all our flu surveillance systems to say, whoops, this is coronavirus.
So they just marked everything corona. That makes sense. So they took everything that was flu and marked it corona. And then this is his warning for the fall.
Next fall and winter, we are going to have two viruses circulating. And we're going to have to distinguish between which is flu and which is the coronavirus. And so the comment that I made, it's more difficult. Doesn't mean it's going to be more impossible.
Oh, gee, I wonder if we're coming up on that second wave of flu, because the flu numbers started going down. They weren't even counting them anymore. COVID's going up. Why is that? So over March and April and May, all of a sudden we just have this huge influx of COVID. And he said so. He said it was because they were actually just marking everything COVID. How convenient for them. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad it was a Christmas miracle that the flu just vanished around, I don't know, the 9th of February. The same time that Italy stopped counting flu was February 9th. Isn't that strange? Because we kept getting told, don't be Italy, don't be China. That fell off the headlines too about this time. They weren't talking about Italy and China anymore because Italy and China were fine. They were just talking about the United States. And then comes the incentive. Yes, they were paid a lot of money for COVID patients. Maybe this is why the hospitals have been so silent all along. Here you go.
A lot of us can't even get access to that. But what I'm trying to say, there's an incentive under conditions by the hospital administrators to put things as COVID 19.
Yes, $40,000 worth of incentive when you have a COVID patient on a ventilator. $13,000 if it's just COVID. That news started coming out as well in the summertime, and it was really, really damning. And then we have this clip.
The new case definition. So for confirmed case, it stays the same. You still just need PCR. But now they've added a probable case definition.
Ooh, what's that?
So that still gets counted towards the case count. It's different. It's not confirmed. It's probable, but it's still a case.
Oh, how do you keep virus going in the summertime when you don't have virus in the summertime? Oh, that's right. You switch it, says Texas Health Department. You just kind of just include anything that's probable. You go, hey, it's probable. Must be COVID. Debbie Birx is probably all over this. COVID, everything's COVID, everything, all I see is COVID, like I see dead people, I see COVID. That's all we were seeing. That's all anybody had. In fact, they weren't even going to the hospital for anything else. Crazy, right? I think it's really crazy and deceptive all at the same time. All right. And so then that was the Texas Health Department. Here's the WHO saying, oh, wait, healthy people, why are you wearing masks? Because asymptomatic people, they can't give you anything.
It still seems to be rare that an asymptomatic person actually transmits onward to a secondary individual.
Huh. Oh, yeah, that's really rare because it hardly ever happens in history. We have healthy people masking up. Is the entire nation, did they just become frail and weak all at the same time? Back in January, they said 24,000 people died of the flu. Nobody batted an eye. Nobody cared. And then all of a sudden, you had even one case in an entire community, and the entire community went on lockdown. Lockdown measures, mask measures. Mandates are still not laws, but they're pretended to be. And we had a whole nation whose economy was hurting, and all this other information started coming out. Let me tell you what was coming out. In fact, let me bring you to the solution. The solution from day one was this vaccine they wanted to give us. For a cold virus, they've never done that before. Why are they doing it now? But lo and behold, it was only the vaccine. Well, guess what we found out at the end of the summer? That we had a little problem with the vaccine patents. In fact, the CDC is the vaccine patent manufacturer. Here you go.
In 1999, patents on coronavirus started showing up.
Just
in 2003, the Center for Disease Control saw the possibility of a gold strike. And that was the coronavirus outbreak that happened in Asia.
Now, by the way, let me just tell you right here, remember the inventor of the PCR test? Had you taken the same exact PCR test that you're taking now in 2004, you would have had SARS. Isn't that amazing? The test is so versatile and flexible.
They saw that a virus they knew could be easily manipulated was something that was very valuable. And in 2003, they sought to patent it. And they made sure that they controlled the proprietary rights to the disease, to the virus, and to its detection, and all of the measurement of it. We know that Anthony Fauci, that Ralph Baric, that the Center for Disease Control, and the laundry list of people who wanted to take credit for inventing coronavirus were at the hub of this story. From 2003 to 2018, they controlled 100% of the cash flow that built the empire around the industrial complex of coronavirus.
Yeah, they owned it. They owned it. They were able to manipulate it. We had bird flu. We had every kind of flu from every kind of animal you could ever imagine, right? In the last 20 years, it's because they owned it. And here's the deal. I just wanted to say this too. About this time in the summertime is when we found out that Neil Ferguson from Imperial College, who had come out with that model, that 13-year-old model in which he said millions and millions and millions would die worldwide, it basically came out as a fraud. Yeah, they never mentioned Neil Ferguson again. Everything we did as a lockdown was built on Neil Ferguson's model from Imperial College. And guess what? It was completely fraudulent and so old. In fact, they had used that model over and over again for Ebola and MERS and every single thing that we actually had heard of. In 2005, Ferguson predicted that up to 150 million people would be killed from the bird flu. Guess how many died? 282. In the entire world. We also found out that the CDC walked back COVID to flu status clear back in May. They also republished this in August and in August. And so we had both accounts where they said, wait a minute, they walked it back to flu status. Not only that, guess what, folks? Only 6% of all the deaths that they've actually attributed to COVID were actual COVID. Everything else had a comorbidity, meaning they were sick with something else like cancer, heart disease, and that's what caused the problem. Isn't that amazing? 6%? That's only over 9,000 people that have actually died from COVID. 9,000, and we locked down a nation, and we are still wearing masks as healthy people. Kind of amazing. And so, let me bring you to this. Here we go.
The shortest time anybody's ever found a vaccine against any disease that I'm familiar with is about 7 years. The average time is 20. To be talking about a magic bullet coming in months, it borders on the absurd.
Yes. People like myself and Tony Fauci are saying 18 months.
A year to a year and a half.
Oh. If everything went perfectly, we could do slightly better than that. But there will be a trade-off. We'll have less safety testing than we typically would have. And so governments will have to decide, do they indemnify the companies and really say, let's go out with this?
Gee, Bill Gates is even warning us, hey, the only option, not your health. No one talks about health or immune system. Immune system's located inside the body, not in a paper mask. They never talk about health, and they never, ever talk about anything other than the vaccine. So the vaccine is the only answer for a cold virus. They've never had that before. But this was the only answer from Gates and Fauci who works for Gates, right? And so you have his company, Gates's company, who owns the patent on coronavirus, on the COVID vaccine. The COVID vaccine says common cold in the wording. Common cold. I thought that was fascinating. And also, Gates is also warning, safety, we're just pushing this thing out. So guess you get what you get. And then that refers back to the PERP Act. We had an act that passed that absolutely just gave total liability to us. The government doesn't take any liability. Listen up.
COVID-19 vaccines is they fall today under the PrEP Act, which came into being after 9/11 and after an anthrax scare. And this law gives virtually blanket liability protection. It's basically impossible to get any kind of compensation if you're injured. So people need to understand that if you take COVID-19 vaccines, you are absolutely on your own.
Yeah, you take it at your own risk, and it messes. It's an RNA vaccine. It's brand new, and they've never, ever really tested this on a large group of people. The ferrets that they gave this to died. You know why? They went into hyper overdrive autoimmune, which means that their body just couldn't stop, and it was like, running like tires in mud. And it didn't hurt them right away. It hurt them when they got sick, and all of a sudden they realized that this new vaccine, this new way of doing this, They don't even want to test it out. They don't even want to take the time to. They just want to rush it out and give it to you. And then Bill Gates, even himself, saying, well, if it's unsafe, too bad, so sad. Government's going to have to decide if they want to go that route. This is just amazing to me. Then, just recently, we had a lawyer in Germany actually be part of a COVID group that's going to go after this on the world stage. Here you go. This is Reimer Fulnick. Here you go.
I am Rainer Fulmich, and I have been admitted to the bar in Germany and in California for 26 years. I have been practicing law primarily as a trial lawyer against fraudulent corporations such as Deutsche Bank, formerly one of the world's largest and most respected banks, today one of the most toxic criminal organizations in this corona crisis, according to all we know today, must be renamed a corona scandal.
Wow.
And those responsible for it must be criminally prosecuted and sued for civil damages. On a political level, everything must be done to make sure that no one will ever again be in a position of such power as to be able to defraud humanity or to attempt to manipulate us with their corrupt agendas. And for this reason, I will now explain to you how and where an international...
Isn't that amazing? He's talking about his international group going through this and saying that we are going to sue now. We're going to sue and we're going to make them liable for doing this to the world. And then last week, Dr. Scott Atlas, because Fauci was fired clear back in April, he's doing all of his own marketing of his interviews. He hasn't been seen with the president at the White House since April. So Fauci's on his own. Don't let him think don't think for a second that he is representing anybody but himself. But Scott Atlas actually is the White House person in charge of coronavirus. And this is the damning words. These are the damning words that he had to say about the public health department, meaning the CDC. Here we go.
Committed.
I can say this. History will record the faces of the public health expertise as some of the most sinful, egregious, epic failures in the history of public policy. They have killed people with their lack of understanding and their lack of caring about not just the impact of cases of COVID-19, a virus that the overwhelming majority of people do well in, notwithstanding, of course, we're not underestimating 200,000 Americans who died. That's tragic. But these people have been a gross failure because they never cared to consider the impact of the policy itself. And the policy itself has been a complete epic failure. And honestly, some people say a crime against humanity.
A crime against humanity. You got that right. 200,000 deaths, honestly, in years where we've had up to 260,000 deaths from flu and respiratory, honestly, is not very high. The success rate, recovery rate success rate, in which you probably wouldn't feel a thing, and maybe sick for 3 days, is 99.8%. That's huge. The numbers just came out. It's 0.02% even have an issue with this. Around the country, and for months on end now, they've been saying only 15,000 people in the entire country, this is the WHO, on worldmeters.com, have been saying only 15,000 people are even considered serious. That doesn't even mean they're hospitalized. So hospitals are not overrun. The CDC came out and said only 6% of the deaths are coming from COVID. Everything else is something else. And we've heard them admit to this as well. This whole thing, this whole year, and the implosion of our economy was all built on lies. It was all built on lies, with the only solution from the very beginning of a cold virus being a vaccine. And they're going to keep the masks on, and they're going to keep this going until that vaccine comes. And then they're going to force the vaccine. Ask yourself why that is. What is in that vaccine that they're desperately wanting to give you and your children? And they have 300 more in the works. The CDC partnered with Bill Gates years ago, and the two of them have been very, very busy in the vaccine department for a reason. They make a lot of money, and they can also put things in those vaccines that can be used for data, all kinds of reasons. I wanted to leave all this with you because there was so much evidence that I actually had to pick through and find some of the more damning pieces of evidence in their own words, but there's so much more. There's so much more here, and there's so many articles written. there's a lot of homework for you to do. And when you have this many accounts of information coming out that takes away from what you're being told by mainstream media, you need to think about it and you need to do some research because there's some very strong sides at play here. Thanks, you guys. Subscribe below and go to katedalleyradio.com for all the rest of the podcasts on all of these things, which we've expanded on basically every show since about the end of January, February. So make sure you go to katedalleyradio.com. Bye, you guys.